Before the world trembled under the thunder of Mongol hooves, the vast Eurasian steppe stretched in endless silence, an ocean of grasslands, winds, and scattered tribes who lived and died by the bow. The steppe world before the Mongols was a land of fierce independence, harsh winters, and unforgiving survival. It was a place where strength, loyalty, and cunning determined one's fate. For centuries, nomadic tribes like the Tatars, Merkits, Naimans, and others, and Kerites fought endlessly for dominance, raiding one another's camps, stealing livestock, and capturing women and children as slaves. Unity was an alien idea. Temporary alliances formed only out of necessity, and betrayal was as common as the rising sun. Yet amid this chaos, destiny prepared a child who would rise above them all. A man who would not only unite the steppe, but reshape the course of world history. That child was Temujin, who would become known to the world as Genghis Khan. Temujin's early life was a crucible of hardship. Born around 1162 near the Onon River, his father, Yesugai, was a minor chieftain of the Borjigin clan. From birth, Temujin's fate was marked by struggle. When he was 9, his father was poisoned by rival Tatars while returning home from arranging his marriage to Berte, a woman from the Ongarat tribe. With Yesugai's death, the family lost protection and standing. The clan, unwilling to support a widow and her young children, abandoned them on the steppe. Temujin, his mother Hoelun, and his siblings faced starvation. They survived by scavenging roots, berries, and hunting small animals. It was a life of hunger, fear, and despair, a life that hardened Temujin's heart and sharpened his will. Even as a boy, Temujin displayed an unusual sense of leadership and resolve. When one of his half-brothers, Bekta, stole food meant for the family, Temujin killed him, a brutal act that demonstrated both his ruthlessness and his understanding of authority. He knew that leadership in the steppe world required absolute dominance. Hesitation meant death. Captured later by the Taishud, a rival tribe, Temujin was enslaved and forced to wear a wooden collar. Yet even in captivity, his charisma and courage shone through. He won the sympathy of one of his captors and escaped under the cover of night. This event would become a turning point, proof that destiny was on his side. Over time, Temujin began to gather followers. These were men who had been cast aside by their tribes, those who sought justice, loyalty, and survival in a chaotic world. Unlike traditional tribal leaders who favored kinship, Temujin he rewarded courage, not lineage. This principle, merit over heritage, became the foundation of his future empire. He built alliances through both diplomacy and conquest. He married Berta and gained the support of her tribe. He sought the mentorship of Togrul, the Khan of the Keret, who became his father figure. Yet the steppe world had no permanent friendships. Rivalries soon grew as Temujin's power increased. The path to unifying the Mongol tribes was soaked in blood and betrayal. Temujin faced constant threats from his old enemies, the Merkits, who kidnapped his wife Berta in revenge for Yesugai's past raids, the Taishud, who sought vengeance for his escape, and even the Naimans and Kerets, who feared his growing influence. Temujin's response was relentless warfare. He pursued Berta's captors, defeated the Merkits, and reclaimed his wife, an act that not only restored his honor, but solidified his claim to leadership. His army grew as defeated enemies joined his cause, attracted by his fairness and strength. By the early 1200s, Temujin had built a disciplined and loyal following. He reorganized his forces into a system that shattered tribal barriers. Each unit, or arban, consisted of 10 men. 10 Arbans formed a Jagan of 100, 10 Jagans made a Mingan of 1,000, and 10 Mingans formed a Tumen of 10,000. This structure broke the old clan loyalties and replaced them with loyalty to the Khan himself. It was an innovation that turned a collection of warring nomads into a unified war machine. Every man was accountable, every unit tightly controlled. Desertion or cowardice meant death, not just for the individual, but for his entire group. In 1206, after years of warfare and negotiation, Temujin achieved what no leader before him could: the unification of the Mongol tribes. At a great council known as the Kurultai, held near the Onon and Kurlan rivers, the assembled chieftains proclaimed him Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. The moment marked the birth of the Mongol Empire. The once fractured steppe was now united under a single banner. Genghis Khan stood at the summit of his ambition. Yet this was only the beginning. His eyes turned outward to the kingdoms, cities, and empires that lay beyond the horizon. But before he could conquer the world, he needed order within his empire. The Mongols, though loyal, were fierce and independent. To govern them, Genghis Khan introduced the Yasa, a code of laws that combined justice, discipline, and moral conduct. The Yasa was more than just a legal system. It was a philosophy of rule. It emphasized loyalty, obedience, and the supremacy of the Khan's will. Theft, adultery, and betrayal were punished with death. Soldiers who abandoned comrades or failed in battle faced execution. Yet, the Yasa also promoted fairness. Religious tolerance was enforced, and women held respected positions within the society. It was a code that reflected Genghis Khan's own values: strict discipline balanced with pragmatic justice. The Yasa transformed the Mongols from a loose confederation into a state with structure and stability. Under this code, every citizen, from the lowest herdsman to the highest general, was bound by the same law. Corruption was not tolerated, and decisions were made collectively through councils. This legal framework allowed Genghis Khan to maintain control even as his empire expanded across vast territories. It created a sense of unity that transcended tribal identity. A brotherhood equally revolutionary were Genghis Khan's military reforms. The Mongol army was a marvel of organization, mobility, and psychological warfare. Each soldier was trained to ride, shoot, and survive in the harshest conditions. Communication was swift and precise, with messages carried across the steppe through relay stations and mounted couriers. Unlike most medieval armies, the Mongols operated without the need for supply trains. Each warrior carried his own provisions, living off his horse's milk and blood, if necessary. This self-sufficiency gave them unmatched speed. Genghis Khan's strategies emphasized flexibility and intelligence. He gathered detailed information about enemies before attacking, using spies, merchants, and scouts. His armies would appear suddenly, strike with terrifying force, and vanish before the enemy could recover. Deception was his greatest weapon. He often feigned retreat, drawing enemies into traps, or spread false rumors to sow confusion. Against fortified cities, he adapted siege techniques learned from conquered peoples, employing engineers, catapults, and even early forms of gunpowder weapons. But the most fearsome weapon of all was fear itself. Genghis Khan understood the psychology of war better than anyone of his time. When cities resisted, he unleashed total destruction, massacres that served as warnings to others. When cities surrendered, they were spared and absorbed into the Mongol system. This ruthless efficiency created a legend of invincibility. word of Mongol cruelty spread faster than their armies, often leading to surrender without a fight. The combination of speed, discipline, and terror made the Mongols unstoppable. Between 1206 and 1211, Genghis Khan solidified his rule over Mongolia and prepared for expansion. His first campaigns targeted neighboring tribes and kingdoms on the borders of northern China. The Jin dynasty, rich and powerful, but internally divided, became his next great enemy. These early campaigns tested his reformed army and introduced the world to the new Mongol style of warfare. Cities that mocked the steppe nomads soon fell, their walls shattered by relentless assaults. By 1211, the Mongols had stormed into Jin territory, marking the beginning of Genghis Khan's conquest of China. The birth of the Mongol Empire was thus not merely a political event. It was the rise of a new order forged from chaos. From a boy abandoned on the frozen plains, Temujin had become Genghis Khan, the master of men and destiny. His empire was founded not on wealth or technology, but on unity, law, and an unbreakable will. The Mongol Empire's origins were steeped in the traditions of the steppe, its freedom, its violence, its simplicity, but it transcended them through vision and leadership. By 1211, Genghis Khan had transformed the Mongols from scattered herdsmen into an organized and unstoppable force. The Yasa bound them by law. His military. When the Mongols thundered into northern China in 1211, the world witnessed the birth of a new era of conquest. What began as scattered raids across the Great Wall soon became one of the most ruthless and brilliant military campaigns in history. Genghis Khan, newly crowned as the ruler of all Mongols, turned his gaze southward toward the wealthy Jin dynasty of northern China. A vast empire of walled cities, advanced technology, and immense riches. The steppe horsemen who once fought for survival among the plains were now united under one purpose: to expand their dominion beyond the horizon. Between 1211 and 1219, Genghis Khan's armies would destroy the Jin, crush Central Asian powers like the Kara-Khitan and the Khwarezmian Empire, and carve their names into history through fire and terror. The Jin dynasty, founded by the Jurchen people, ruled over northern China and had long looked down upon the nomads to the north as barbaric. They had once forced the Mongols and other tribes to pay tribute, keeping them divided and weak. But Genghis Khan had shattered that old order. In 1211, after consolidating his power in Mongolia, he declared war on the Jin. His motives were both strategic and symbolic. The Jin represented everything the steppe despised: decadence, arrogance, and the illusion of security behind city walls. The Mongols launched their invasion with around 100,000 horsemen, divided into disciplined units led by Genghis Khan's most trusted generals: Subutai, Jebe, Jochi, and Ogadai. Their knowledge of terrain, mobility, and coordination gave them a massive advantage over the Jin's larger but slower armies. The Jin relied heavily on fortified cities, static defenses, and crossbowmen. But these advantages meant little against the speed and ferocity of the Mongol cavalry. The first major battle came at the pass of Bajamouth, or Wusha Fort. The Jin expected to hold the mountain passes easily, but Genghis Khan used deception and reconnaissance to outmaneuver them. His scouts found hidden routes through the hills, allowing Mongol forces to encircle the Jin defenders. The Mongols rained arrows from high ground, cutting off escape routes, and then charged with overwhelming force. The Jin army was annihilated. This victory opened the gates to the northern plains of China. Once inside Jin territory, the Mongols unleashed a campaign of calculated terror. Cities that resisted were annihilated. Those that surrendered were spared but heavily taxed. The Mongols did not aim for conquest alone. They sought submission. They allowed local officials to keep their positions as long as they recognized Mongol authority. It was a system of practical governance that combined fear with opportunity. Genghis Khan understood that terror was a weapon as powerful as the bow. Each city that fell served as a warning to the next. By 1213, the Mongols had advanced deep into Jin territory, devastating one province after another. The Jin Emperor Wanyan Yongji attempted to rally his forces, but was paralyzed by internal court politics and incompetence. Genghis Khan's generals conducted simultaneous offensives, with Subutai leading raids into the east and Jebe attacking from the west. They encircled cities, cut supply lines, and slaughtered garrisons. The Mongol army moved with mechanical precision, striking like lightning and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. The siege of Zhongdu, the Jin capital, modern-day Beijing, became the defining episode of this campaign. In 1215, after years of Mongol assaults across the north, the city stood as the last bastion of Jin power. Zhongdu was vast, fortified with massive walls and defended by tens of thousands of soldiers. Yet within its walls, fear had already begun to eat away at morale. The Mongols surrounded the city, cutting off food and water. They employed siege engines, catapults, battering rams, and flaming projectiles, built by captured Chinese and Muslim engineers. For months, Zhongdu held out under brutal conditions. Corpses piled in the streets. Disease spread and desperation grew. The Jin Emperor abandoned the city, fleeing south to Kaifeng. The Mongols intensified their bombardment. Finally, after more than a year of siege, Zhongdu's defenders surrendered in 1215. What followed was one of the bloodiest massacres of the medieval world. The Mongols poured into the city, setting it ablaze. Flames devoured palaces and temples. Smoke darkened the skies for days. Thousands were slaughtered, and the once great capital was reduced to ashes. The siege of Zhongdu demonstrated not only Mongol power, but their philosophy of war: uncompromising, total, and psychological. The fall of Zhongdu did not mean the complete end of the Jin dynasty, but it marked the destruction of their northern heartland. The survivors fled south, but the Mongols had made their point. The mightiest walls in the world could not save those who defied Genghis Khan. The Mongols returned to the steppe victorious, richer than ever and hungrier for more. With China's north subdued, Genghis Khan turned his attention westward. The next target was Central Asia, a crossroads of trade and culture, home to powerful states like the Karakhitan Khanate and the Khwarezmian Empire. These regions controlled the Silk Road, the arteries of Eurasian commerce, and Genghis Khan saw both opportunity and threat in them. The Karakhitan Khanate, founded by remnants of the Liao dynasty, ruled over much of modern-day Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and parts of western China. Though they had once been strong, by 1216 their rule was weakened by rebellion and internal strife. When Genghis Khan's generals pursued the fleeing Naiman prince Kuchlug into their territory, they encountered Karakhitan resistance. The Mongols moved swiftly, defeating Kuchlug and toppling the Khanate by 1218. The conquest was quick and efficient, and the local Muslim population welcomed the Mongols as liberators from Kuchlug's oppressive rule. This victory opened the western gates of Asia and brought the Mongols into contact with the vast Khwarezmian Empire. At the height of its power, The Khwarezmian Empire stretched from Persia to Transoxiana, ruled by Shah Muhammad II. It was a sophisticated Islamic state, rich from trade and culture. Genghis Khan initially sought peace and commerce, sending a caravan of merchants to establish diplomatic relations and trade routes. But the Shah, arrogant and distrustful of the barbarian nomads, made a fatal mistake. The governor of Otrar, suspecting the Mongol merchants of espionage, arrested and executed them, confiscating their goods. Genghis Khan responded with fury. He sent 3 envoys demanding justice. The Shah not only refused but humiliated the envoys, executing one and mutilating the others. That act sealed the empire's fate. In 1219, Genghis Khan assembled one of the greatest military campaigns in history, leading around 200,000 men across the deserts of Central Asia. His objective was not merely victory, it was vengeance. The Mongols crossed the Jaxartes River and struck with surgical precision. Cities like Otrar, Bukhara, and Samarkand, which had stood for centuries as jewels of Islamic civilization, fell one after another. Otrar, the city where the caravan had been slain, faced the full measure of Mongol wrath. After a prolonged siege, the walls were breached and the city was destroyed. The governor who had executed the Mongol merchants was captured and executed by having molten silver poured into his eyes and mouth, a chilling message to others who might defy the Khan. At Bukhara, one of the most revered cities of Islam, Genghis Khan entered the Grand Mosque, dismounted, and addressed the trembling citizens. "If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." His words echoed his belief that he was a divine instrument of fate, chosen to punish the corrupt and the arrogant. The city was looted, its people enslaved, and its scholars scattered. Samarkand, the Khwarezmian capital, fell soon after. The Shah's army, numbering over 100,000, was destroyed by the far more disciplined Mongol cavalry. The Shah fled westward, abandoning his people, and eventually died on a remote island in the Caspian Sea. Genghis Khan's vengeance was complete, but the bloodshed was far from over. As the Mongols moved deeper into Persia, the city of Nishapur became the stage for one of the most horrifying massacres in world history. In 1221, during the mopping-up operations of the Khwarezmian campaign, Genghis Khan's son-in-law, Tokhar, was killed while besieging the city. When news reached Genghis Khan's daughter, Tokhar's wife, she demanded retribution. The Khan granted her wish. After Nishapur fell, the Mongols exterminated nearly the entire population, men, women, and children alike. Some chroniclers claimed 1.7 million people were killed, though the true number was likely smaller. Still, the destruction was absolute. The city was leveled, its streets piled with skulls. The massacre of Nishapur became a symbol of Mongol wrath, an unrelenting vengeance that erased entire civilizations. The campaigns between 1211 and 1219 established the Mongols as the supreme military power of the age. In less than a decade, Genghis Khan had destroyed the Jin's northern empire, conquered Central Asia, and annihilated one of the greatest Islamic kingdoms of the medieval world. His methods were brutal but effective: intelligence, discipline, speed, and terror. His armies moved with a precision that astonished contemporaries and horrified survivors. Yet behind the destruction was a deeper purpose. Genghis Khan was not merely a conqueror, he was a builder of empire. He integrated conquered peoples into his administration, using Chinese engineers, Persian scribes, and Muslim merchants to govern his rapidly expanding domains. He respected talent regardless of origin, and rewarded loyalty above all else. His campaigns opened the Silk Road under Mongol protection, creating a bridge between East and West that would later usher in a new age of global exchange. By 1219, Genghis Khan had achieved what no steppe ruler before him had even dared to dream. From the Great Wall of China to the deserts of Persia, the Mongol Empire stretched across thousands of miles. It was an empire born of fear, discipline, and vision, an unstoppable force that reshaped the political map of the world. The Jin were broken, the Karakitan erased, and the Khwarezmian Empire obliterated. But even as the fires of conquest burned across Asia, Genghis Khan's ambitions were only beginning. The next decade would see the Mongols sweep through Persia, Russia, and Europe, leaving behind a legacy both feared and admired. Between 1211 and 1219, the world learned the meaning of Mongol power, the relentless will of a man who turned tribes into armies, armies into nations, and nations into dust. The steppe horsemen had become the masters of the world, and their thunder would not cease until the edges of civilization themselves were consumed by their storm. By 1220, Genghis Khan stood as the most feared man on earth. The Mongol war machine, forged on the cold steppes of Mongolia, now swept through the rich lands of Persia like a plague of fire and iron. What began as a mission of vengeance for a murdered trade caravan became a campaign of total destruction, an apocalypse that engulfed cities, civilizations, and entire peoples. Genghis Khan's invasion of Persia was not merely a conquest. It was a brutal message to the world that no empire, no wall, and no god could protect those who defied him. The Khwarezmian Empire, once powerful and prosperous, crumbled like sand beneath the Mongol tide. After the Shah's flight and death, his son, Jalal ad-Din Mingburnu, tried to rally resistance, but Genghis Khan was relentless. From 1220 onward, his generals, Subutai, Jebi, Jochi, and Tului, led massive armies across Transoxiana and Persia, executing a campaign that combined ruthless efficiency with terrifying destruction. Samarkand, which had surrendered once before, rebelled again, and paid the ultimate price. The Mongols stormed the city, killing tens of thousands and enslaving the rest. The once proud jewel of Central Asia was reduced to ash. Bukhara too burned again under Mongol occupation. Genghis Khan himself entered the city's great mosque, gazing upon the trembling imams and scholars. Climbing the pulpit, he declared, "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me. God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." His words were not bluster. They reflected a deep conviction that his conquests were divinely sanctioned. To him, the Mongol expansion was not random destruction, but the fulfillment of fate's will. The mosque was turned into a stable for Mongol horses, a symbol of total humiliation. The Mongols' invasion of Persia was systematic and devastating. Cities that resisted, like Merv, Herat, and Nishapur, were obliterated. Chroniclers wrote that in Merv alone, more than 700,000 were slaughtered. Every man, woman, and child was killed. The city of Urgench, one of the richest in Central Asia, faced a similar fate. Its siege lasted months. When it finally fell, the Mongols drowned it in blood. The destruction was so immense that it was said the Amu Darya River ran red for days. Behind these massacres lay cold strategy. Genghis Khan believed terror was the most effective weapon. He did not destroy for pleasure, but to ensure obedience. When word of such horrors spread, entire cities surrendered without a fight. The Mongols punished defiance, but rewarded submission, allowing conquered artisans, engineers, and scholars to live. Many were relocated to serve in the growing Mongol administration. The empire was built on both destruction and assimilation. By 1221, Jalal ad-Din, the last Khwarezmian prince, stood as the final hope of resistance. He fought bravely, gathering remnants of his father's shattered empire and clashing with Mongol forces near the Indus River. In a dramatic battle, the Mongols overwhelmed his army, but Jalal ad-Din refused to surrender. When surrounded, he charged through enemy lines and leapt on horseback into the Indus River, escaping into India. Genghis Khan, watching from the cliff, admired his courage and ordered his men not to pursue. It was one of the few times the Khan expressed respect for an enemy. With Persia annihilated and Central Asia subdued, Genghis Khan's empire now stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea. Yet his ambitions went beyond conquest. He saw himself as the master of the world, chosen by eternal heaven, Tengri, to unite all nations under Mongol rule. After the Persian campaigns, he sent letters to the great rulers of his time, the Caliph in Baghdad, the Sultan of Egypt, and even the Pope and Christian kings in Europe. In his message to Caliph al-Nasir of Baghdad, Genghis Khan expressed both warning and vision. He demanded submission and tribute, declaring that the Mongols were destined to rule the earth by divine decree. "If you obey me, I will protect you," he wrote. "But if you rebel, I will destroy you." The Caliph ignored him, confident behind his walls and armies, an arrogance that would one day bring doom upon Baghdad itself when Genghis Khan's descendants returned in vengeance. These letters revealed the Khan's extraordinary worldview. He did not see his empire as a simple kingdom of conquest, but as a universal order under his law. The Yasa, his code, was to govern not just the Mongols, but all people. He valued loyalty, discipline, and justice above religion or race. Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, all were equal under his rule as long as they obeyed. His empire became the first truly global force in history, linking East and West in trade, communication, and warfare. Yet even as his dream expanded, the Khan's life neared its end. By 1226, his gaze turned east once more toward the Tangut kingdom of Western Xia, which had earlier defied Mongol authority. Despite previous warnings, the Tangut rulers had withheld troops and tribute during the Khwarezmian War. Genghis Khan, unwilling to tolerate defiance, led a massive campaign against them. The Mongols stormed through their cities, destroying one after another in a merciless campaign. During this final war, the old conqueror was wounded, some say in battle, others by a fall from his horse. He continued to command until victory was certain. In 1227, as the Tangut capital of Ningxia fell, Genghis Khan's strength finally faded. On his deathbed, he ordered that no one should know of his passing until the campaign was complete. When the Tangut were annihilated, the greatest conqueror the world had ever known breathed his last. The news of his death was concealed from all but his closest companions. His body was carried back to Mongolia under absolute secrecy. According to legend, his funeral escort killed anyone who saw the procession. His burial place remains unknown to this day, somewhere in the mountains near the Onon River, hidden by forests and time. Myths say that after his burial, soldiers rode horses over his grave to conceal it, and 1,000 men were executed to preserve the secret. Whether truth or legend, the mystery endures like the man himself. When Genghis Khan died, his empire stretched across more of the world than that of any previous ruler. He had conquered from Korea to Persia, from the Siberian tundra to the borders of India. Yet his true legacy was not only in conquest, but in transformation. He united the steppe tribes into a single, unstoppable force and forged a new world order. Under his successors, the Mongol Empire would continue to expand, reaching the gates of Europe and the heart of the Middle East. The world he left behind was scarred and reshaped. Ancient cities lay in ruins, empires vanished, and millions perished. But from that destruction rose a new age of connection, the Pax Mongolica, where trade, ideas, and technologies flowed across continents under Mongol protection. The fires that Genghis Khan unleashed burned civilizations to ash, yet from those ashes emerged a more interconnected world. In the end, the man who was born an orphan on the cold Mongolian plains had set the world ablaze. His name would echo for centuries as both a curse and a legend. Genghis Khan, the scourge of God, the ruler of the earth, and the master who united the steppes beneath his iron will. His empire began with blood and ended with silence, buried under the eternal winds of the steppe, where his spirit still rides, unseen but never forgotten. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, his empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea, an expanse unmatched in human history. But his death did not end the Mongol storm. It marked the beginning of an even greater era of expansion under his descendants. Bound by his final command to conquer the world, his sons and grandsons unleashed new waves of conquest that carried Mongol banners from Korea to the heart of Europe, from Siberia to the sands of Arabia. Under Ogadai, Genghis Khan's third son and chosen successor, the Mongol Empire reached its peak, an unstoppable force that reshaped continents. Ogadai Khan inherited not only an empire, but a vision, a world united under Mongol law and order. Crowned Great Khan in 1229 at a grand Kurultai, he immediately began organizing his father's conquests into a functioning state. He established a permanent capital at Karakoram on the Orkhon River, transforming the nomadic empire into a centralized administration. From this capital, he governed with both pragmatism and ambition, delegating authority to trusted generals and family members, while planning new campaigns on every frontier. The first of Ogadai's major offensives was directed eastward into Korea and south into the remnants of the Jin dynasty. The Jin, weakened after decades of Mongol assaults, still clung to their southern territories. Ogadai sent a vast army to finish what his father had begun. In 1234, after a series of brutal sieges, the Mongols crushed the Jin once and for all. The dynasty that had ruled northern China for over a century was obliterated. Its cities were looted, its lands absorbed into the Mongol realm. The fall of the Jin opened the path to the conquest of all China, a goal that Genghis Khan's grandsons would later complete. At the same time, Mongol armies pushed east into the Korean peninsula. The Goryeo kingdom resisted fiercely, but could not withstand the speed and ferocity of Mongol warfare. Between 1231 and 1259, successive campaigns devastated the land. The Koreans eventually submitted, becoming a vassal state that paid tribute and provided ships for Mongol invasions of Japan. Ogadai's expansion eastward secured the empire's dominance over Asia's eastern rim, but his gaze soon turned west, toward the richest lands of Europe. The western campaigns were commanded by Genghis Khan's grandsons, Batu Khan, the son of Jochi, and the legendary generals Subutai and Kadan. Their target, the great kingdoms of Eastern and Central Europe. The invasion began in 1236 with the subjugation of the Volga Bulgars and the destruction of the Kievan Rus. Principalities. The Mongols swept across Russia like a hurricane, burning cities such as Ryazan, Vladimir, and Kiev to ashes. By 1241, they reached the borders of Poland and Hungary, where two of the most dramatic battles in medieval history would unfold: the battles of Legnica and Mohi. At Legnica in April 1241, a coalition of European knights, Poles, Germans and Teutonic crusaders met the Mongol vanguard led by Baidar and Kadan. The Europeans fought bravely, clad in heavy armor and armed with swords and lances, but they were no match for Mongol strategy. Subutai's forces used feigned retreats, encirclements and volleys of arrows to break the crusaders' formation. When the knights charged, they were lured into traps and annihilated. The Duke of Silesia, Henry II, was killed, his head mounted on a spear as a grim warning. Europe trembled. 3 days later, in Hungary, the main Mongol army under Batu and Subutai met King Bela IV's forces at the Battle of Mohi on the Sejo River. The Hungarians, numbering over 80,000, believed their fortified camp and river defences would hold. But the Mongols' engineering and intelligence were unmatched. Subutai's men constructed pontoon bridges, crossed the river under cover of night, and attacked from multiple directions at dawn. Panic swept through the Hungarian ranks as fire arrows and catapults rained destruction. By the end of the day, the Hungarian army was crushed. Tens of thousands lay dead, and the road to Western Europe lay open. Europe stood on the brink of annihilation. The Mongols had reached the gates of Vienna, and nothing stood between them and the heart of Christendom. Then, unexpectedly, the invasion stopped. News arrived that Ögedei Khan had died in December 1241. Following Mongol custom, all princes and generals were required to return to Mongolia for the election of a new great Khan. Europe was spared, not by strength, but by the hand of fate. Had Ögedei lived longer, history might have been written in Mongol script. While Subutai's horsemen rode home from Europe, the empire's eastern front continued to expand. In China, the Mongols completed the destruction of the Jin and turned against the Song dynasty in the south. Ögedei's policies laid the groundwork for the eventual rise of the Yuan dynasty under his nephew Kublai Khan. By integrating Chinese administrators, engineers, and siege experts into the Mongol command, Ögedei ensured that the empire's future rulers could govern vast settled populations effectively. The fusion of steppe discipline and Chinese bureaucracy became a cornerstone of Mongol rule. After Ögedei's death, the empire briefly fractured as rival factions vied for power. But expansion continued under his successors, particularly his grandson, Mongol Khan, and his brother, Hulagu Khan, whose campaigns transformed the Middle East forever. Hulagu's armies were tasked with subduing the Islamic world, which had resisted Mongol authority. Marching west from Central Asia in the 1250s, Hulagu built one of the largest Mongol armies ever assembled. Bolstered by Persian engineers and Chinese siege masters, in 1256 he destroyed the strongholds of the Assassins, the feared Nizari Ismaili sect, ending centuries of terror from their mountain fortresses. But his true target lay further west, Baghdad, the fabled capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, the heart of the Islamic world. In January 1258, the Mongols encircled Baghdad with tens of thousands of troops. The Caliph, Al-Mustasim, refused to surrender, trusting in divine protection and ancient prestige. Hulagu responded with total war. For 2 weeks, catapults hurled stones and fire into the city's walls until they crumbled. When the Mongols entered, they unleashed one of the most devastating massacres in human history. The Tigris River reportedly ran black with ink from destroyed books and red with the blood of the slain. The Caliph himself was captured and executed, rolled in a carpet and trampled to death by horses, so that no royal blood would be spilled. The fall of Baghdad ended more than 5 centuries of Abbasid rule and marked a turning point in Islamic civilization. The city that had once been the center of science, art, and learning was left in ruins. Libraries were burned, scholars slain, and the House of Wisdom, the jewel of the Muslim world, was gone forever. Hulagu's conquest of Baghdad symbolized both the zenith of Mongol power and the depths of their devastation. In the aftermath, Hulagu established the Ilkhanate, the Mongol state that ruled Persia and Mesopotamia. Under the Ilkhans, Persia became a vital part of the Mongol Empire's global network. The new rulers rebuilt cities, reopened trade along the Silk Road, and embraced Persian culture and administration. Over time, the Ilkhanate shifted from pure conquest to governance and diplomacy. Later Ilkhans converted to Islam, blending steppe traditions with Persian and Islamic civilization, a fusion that shaped the region for centuries. By 1259, the empire Genghis Khan had founded stood as the largest contiguous empire in history. From the forests of Siberia to the Mediterranean, from Korea to Hungary, the sons and grandsons of the great Khan had carried his dream to its furthest horizon. The Mongol Empire had united East and West through conquest, trade, and terror. Yet even at its height, the seeds of division had been sown. The vast empire, ruled by distant Khanates, Golden Horde, Chagatai, Ilkhanate, and Yuan, would soon drift apart. But during these decades of fire and thunder, the world had witnessed something it could never forget: the power of the steppe unleashed upon civilization, guided by the blood of Genghis Khan. When Kublai Khan rose to power in 1260, the Mongol Empire stood at its zenith, yet teetered on the edge of fragmentation. A grandson of Genghis Khan, Kublai was no longer just a steppe warrior. He was a visionary statesman, determined to blend the traditions of his nomadic heritage with the sophistication of the Chinese world he sought to rule. Under his leadership, the Mongol Empire entered a new age, the Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace, a time when the world's greatest empire fostered stability, trade, and cultural exchange on an unprecedented scale. Kublai's most enduring achievement was the conquest of the Song Dynasty, the last major holdout in southern China. The war, lasting from 1268 to 1279, tested even the might of the Mongol armies. The Song possessed vast resources, fortified cities, and naval strength. But Kublai combined the Mongols' mastery of mobility with the Chinese art of siegecraft and river warfare. His generals, using massive catapults and fire weapons, slowly pushed southward until in 1279, the final Song fleet was annihilated at the Battle of Yamen. The young Song emperor drowned himself rather than be captured. For the first time in centuries, China was united under a single ruler, the Yuan dynasty, proclaimed by Kublai in 1271. As Emperor of China, Kublai Khan ruled not from a tent, but from a palace in Khanbalik, modern Beijing. He adopted Chinese systems of government, employed Confucian scholars, and promoted agriculture and education, yet never forgot his Mongol roots. His administration sought to merge East and West, maintaining Mongol military dominance while embracing Chinese bureaucracy. Under his reign, the Mongol Empire became not just an engine of conquest, but a global civilization. Yet even Kublai's ambitions met limits. Determined to extend his dominion across the seas, he launched 2 great invasions of Japan in 1274 and 1281. Both ended in catastrophe. The first was wrecked by storms after brief fighting. The second, a massive armada of more than 4,000 ships, was scattered by a typhoon so fierce that the Japanese called it kamikaze, the divine wind. The failed invasion. Among those travelers was Marco Polo, the Venetian merchant who reached Kublai's court in the 1270s. Awed by the grandeur of the Yuan capital, the vast wealth of the East, and the order of Kublai's administration, Marco Polo's later writings transformed Europe's image of Asia. To his readers, Cathay became a land of wonder and enlightenment, a mythic vision of the world under Mongol peace. The Pax Mongolica did not erase the violence of earlier conquests, but it created a bridge between civilizations. Under Kublai Khan, the Empire of Horsemen became an empire of the world, its roads binding east and west in a harmony of trade, tolerance, and ambition that would echo long after the last Khan's reign had ended. When Kublai Khan died in 1294, the Mongol Empire was still the largest contiguous land empire in human history, but its unity had already begun to unravel. The vision of a single world under Mongol rule faded as rival khanates drifted apart, ruled by descendants who shared blood but not purpose. The Pax Mongolica gave way to suspicion, civil war, and the slow erosion of the empire's foundations. What Genghis Khan had built with iron discipline and ruthless order now fractured under the weight of its vastness. Succession became the first great poison. After Kublai's death, his chosen successor, Temur Khan, 1294 to 1307, struggles to maintain authority even within China. Across the steppe and beyond, before great khanates, the Yuan dynasty in China, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Golden Horde in Russia had grown independent in all but name, each ruled by its own lineage, each adapted to local cultures, and each pursued its own destiny. A grand Kurultai that once bound Mongol princes together was now a memory. In the west, the Golden Horde, founded by Batu Khan, held sway over the vast plains of Russia and Eastern Europe. From their capital at Sarai on the Volga River, they ruled the Rus principalities through tribute and terror. For 2 centuries, Russian princes bent the knee to Mongol tax collectors known as the Baskaks. Yet over time, the horde's power began to wane. The Mongols converted to Islam, aligning themselves with the Turkic peoples of the steppe and losing their distinct Mongol identity. Internal feuds between rival Khans, especially between the blue and white hordes, further weakened them. Meanwhile, the Russian city of Moscow slowly rose in strength, uniting nearby territories and preparing for the day when it would cast off Mongol rule. Further south, the Ilkhanate of Persia, established by Hulagu Khan after the destruction of Baghdad in 1258, experienced both brilliance and decay. Under rulers like Ghazan Khan, ruled 1295 to 1304, the Ilkhanate embraced Islam and adopted Persian administration and culture, creating a golden age of reform, architecture, and art. But after Ghazan's death, the Ilkhanate fell into chaos. Succession crises, famine, and plague devastated the land. By the mid-14th century, the Ilkhanate had splintered into competing dynasties, paving the way for new powers like the Timurids and Ottomans to rise from its ashes. In Central Asia, the Chagatai Khanate, named after Genghis Khan's second son, was also transformed. The nomadic Khans of the Chagatai lineage ruled a land that stretched from the Tarim Basin to Samarkand. Over time, many Chagatai rulers adopted Islam, blending Mongol law, Yasa, with Sharia. This fusion reshaped Central Asian identity, giving rise to new cultural centers such as Bukhara and Kashgar. Yet religious division and political strife tore the Khanate apart. By the 1330s, it had split into western and eastern halves, each ruled by rival families. The once proud horsemen of Genghis Khan had become settled kings, no longer conquerors, but caretakers of a fading legacy. The greatest symbol of decline came in China, where the Yuan dynasty, Kublai's proud creation, collapsed under its own contradictions. The Mongols, alien rulers in a vast and ancient land, faced resentment from the Chinese population. Heavy taxation, floods, corruption, and natural disasters fueled rebellion. The Mongols' preference for their own elites alienated Confucian scholars, while their lavish court drained the treasury. In 1351, the Red Turban Rebellion erupted, led by secret societies invoking both Buddhist and nationalist sentiment. As the rebellion spread, the Yuan court could no longer maintain control. Provinces broke away, armies deserted, and famine ravaged the countryside. In 1368, the rebel leader Zhu Yuanzhang, once a peasant monk, marched into Khanbalik and declared the birth of the Ming dynasty. The last Yuan emperor fled north to Mongolia, marking the end of Mongol rule in China. What had begun with the thunder of hooves and the fall of empires ended with silence and exile. By the late 14th century, the once unified Mongol Empire had vanished. The Golden Horde lingered in name. The Chagatai Khanate fractured into dust, and the Yuan remnants returned to the steppe, clinging to fading memories of glory. The world they had reshaped through conquest, commerce, and chaos moved on. Yet their legacy endured. The trade routes they opened, the technologies they spread, and the echoes of their power in the rise of new empires from Moscow to Samarkand. The era of Mongol world rule ended not with defeat in battle, but with transformation. The conquerors of the world became part of it, absorbed into the very civilizations they had once subdued. The winds that had once carried their banners across continents now whispered only through the empty steppes, where Genghis Khan's dream had been born, burned bright, and finally faded into legend. The Mongol Empire, though it lasted scarcely more than a century as a unified power, left an imprint on world history that endures to this day. It was not merely an empire of conquest, it was an empire that reshaped the political, cultural, and psychological landscape of Eurasia. The Mongols' legacy is written in both terror and transformation, in ashes and innovation. What began as a confederation of steppe tribes under Genghis Khan became the catalyst for a new world order, one forged through the extremes of destruction and exchange. One of the most defining aspects of Mongol rule was their mastery of psychological warfare. The Mongols understood that fear could conquer cities faster than any army. Before attacking, they often sent envoys demanding surrender under the threat of total annihilation. Those who resisted were obliterated. Those who submitted were spared and integrated. The news of their brutality traveled faster than their horses, spreading panic before they arrived. Entire cities surrendered at the mere sight of their banners. The massacre of Nishapur, the destruction of Baghdad, and the burning of Kiev became grim symbols of Mongol vengeance. But terror was never chaos. It was strategy. Genghis Khan used fear as a weapon of precision. By demonstrating overwhelming cruelty toward rebels and mercy toward the obedient, he created a pattern that imposed control over vast territories with minimal resistance. The Mongols also practiced intelligence warfare, sending scouts and spies ahead to map routes, spread rumors, and sow confusion. In this way, psychological dominance became as vital as physical conquest, forging an empire bound not only by swords, but by the fear of their return. Yet, beyond the shadow of destruction, The Mongol conquests opened pathways for exchange on an unprecedented scale. For the first time in history, almost the entire Eurasian landmass, from China to the Mediterranean, was connected under a single political system. This network enabled the free flow of ideas, goods, technologies, and even diseases. The Silk Road reached its golden age under Mongol protection. Merchants, scholars, and travelers could cross continents with a security unknown in earlier ages. Chinese gunpowder, paper, and printing spread westward, transforming warfare, communication, and knowledge. In return, the Mongols absorbed Persian administration, Islamic science, and European craftsmanship. The use of diplomacy, including permanent envoys and passports, paisi, allowed for stable communication between distant courts, from the Yuan emperors in China to the Ilkhans in Persia. But these same routes also carried catastrophe. The Black Death, originating in Asia around the 1330s, spread along Mongol trade lines to the Middle East and Europe. By 1350, it had killed tens of millions, shattering populations and economies. Ironically, the same global integration that the Mongols had created also accelerated humanity's greatest pandemic. The plague, transmitted through caravans and ships, was a grim testament to the interconnectedness of the Mongol world, a tragic consequence of their success. Culturally, the Mongols left behind more than ruins. They left myths and legends that shaped how history remembers them. In the West, they were long seen as savage horsemen, the scourge of God, who brought ruin to civilization. In the East, Genghis Khan became a near-divine figure, a unifier blessed by heaven. In Mongolia today, he is revered as the father of the nation, his image adorning currency, monuments, and hearts alike. The shadow of Genghis stretches across centuries, admired by conquerors from Tamerlane to Napoleon, and studied by strategists for his genius in mobility, discipline, and organization. Historians continue to debate the Mongols' dual nature. Were they destroyers or creators, barbarians or visionaries? The truth lies somewhere between. They annihilated empires, but also birthed new worlds. They burned libraries, but built roads that carried knowledge. Their violence broke civilizations apart, yet the trade and diplomacy they fostered reconnected them in new forms. In the end, the Mongol Empire was not merely a chapter of conquest. It was a turning point in global history. It compressed continents into contact, accelerated the exchange of science and culture, and reminded humanity of both its fragility and its interconnectedness. The steppe still whispers their story, of riders who came from the endless grasslands to shape the destiny of empires, of terror that became transformation, of the wind that carried both death and discovery. Though their empire crumbled, the echo of their hooves still resounds across history, an eternal reminder of how the world was once bound by the will of one man from the steppes, Genghis Khan.